Okay, so now if we're going to expect our public sector leaders to choose innovation over business as usual, then we're going to have to give them new ways to pay for things. You're a government person and you're like, I should probably just do the tunnel. Meanwhile, all the citizens are like, I'll bring on the green infrastructure. But that's risky. This is safe. Given have to pay for things. And we went in and said, listen, why don't we do this weird outcomes-based financing thing? And said, what if we brought in investors, impact investors, which are a source of capital that's growing exponentially every year. Let's get them to somehow pay for this green infrastructure to the point where they're taking the performance risk of the green infrastructure off of your shoulders, you being the government. And we're seeing in the marketplace a growing appetite for that from investors, which is good news for municipalities. So if money is moving in that direction, let's go. We want great environmental outcomes, we want great health outcomes, and we want great social outcomes, and we want great economic outcomes. Let's do that.
This is Eric Letsinger, who's the CEO of Quantified Ventures. Welcome, Eric.
Hey, thanks, Jamie. Pleasure to be here.
Eric, Quantified Ventures. Give us, we're going to launch, of course, into the projects you do, but give us kind of the overview mechanics of the things you guys are doing that lies at the heart of it all.
Sure. Well, let's hear. So Quantified Ventures, we are an outcomes-based capital firm, which is sort of a mouthful here, but and we start with the basic premise that if we are going to expect our government leaders to tackle the massive challenges that are landing at their feet every day, pick a thing, climate change, they're going to have to innovate up that mountain, if you will, right? They're probably not going to be successful business as usualing, if that could be a verb, up that mountain. They're probably not going to get up that mountain through business as usual. Okay, so now if we're going to expect our public sector leaders to choose innovation over business as usual, then we're going to have to give them new ways to pay for things. Because the tools that they have, I've spent a third of my career running agencies at the municipal level. The tools that we have to buy things in the government generally are about borrowing the money, choosing the project, spending the money, kind of hoping for the best, and then you got to pay back that debt because you borrowed it through a bond, regardless of whether the thing you did actually works or not, right? So there's no connection between your borrowing and whether the things you're doing actually work or not. And so we got to work with this simple notion of, can we try to flip that a little bit? We don't have a capital problem, meaning with impact capital, pick a source of capital, that's all growing, right? So we do not have an access to capital problem. We have a deployment of capital problem. So if there's plenty of private capital to be deployed, let's flip that switch a little bit and let's let that capital go ahead and take some of the risk off of the government's shoulders, the performance risk of these projects, just enough to turn the table so that it becomes a rational choice for the government to choose innovation instead of business as usual.
So let's take that then, Eric. Let's illuminate the ideas you've talked about to the first project, the environmental impact bond. Tell us about this. This is, folks, one of their early applications of this work Eric's talking about to make things happen. Sure.
I'll talk about the first transaction that we closed, which is here in Washington, D.C., where I live. And here's the background. The background was the D.C. Water and Sewer Authority. By the way, we're going to talk about sewers, so hang in there. I'll try to make it interesting. So the D.C. Water and Sewer Authority operates what's called a combined sewer system. Hang in there with me. We're going to 2 minutes on sewers. A combined, by the way, 455 cities around the United States have combined sewer system. Nobody wants a combined sewer system. It's a failed architecture from 150 years. And what does it mean? The word combine, here's a sewer, it's a pipe. Sewer, combined means two things go through it. Poop, right? Flush the toilet, right? Goes through things and then through the pipe, right? And then the other thing that goes through it is stormwater, meaning rains, hit your roof, gutter, down into the thing, and then it's in the sewer. So stormwater is going through it, poop. And now you have a fixed diameter of a sewer, which means only so much can go through it. Fair? Okay. And then where do those pipes go? They go to the treatment facility that's somewhere that you never see, and it's way over there. And the pipes go there, and they clean it, and they scrub it, and they do fancy things. And then once they've cleaned it and scrubbed it, done fancy things, it slowly discharges into the Potomac River after it's been cleaned. However, when it rains more than 1.2 inches in a 48-hour period, which it used to never do, now it always does, climate change, the pipe can't handle it because of all the stormwater that's going through the peak volume of that rain can't fit through the pipe. So it's designed, the pipe system that combines is designed when that happens, it doesn't go to the treatment facility. It just goes straight to the Potomac River, which is nasty. Think about that. Yeah, straight to the Potomac River. And by the way, that happens all the time, which is why it's illegal to touch the Potomac River. Anybody know that? DC people? Kind of weird, right? Can't touch it. Don't even look at it. Don't even look at it. All right. So the EPA steps in and says, listen, bunch of you cities, and by the way, it's the political third rail. Nobody fixes it because it's expensive. You just worked really hard to become the mayor of a city. The first way to not become the mayor is to fix that. Because let me just ask anybody, does anybody want your water rates to be higher? Because it would cost money to fix that, right? So that's why nobody fixes it. Fair? Okay. So the EPA slaps some consent decrees on some cities, including DC, and says, you got to fix it, which gave the politicians some relief to say, okay, we will fix it, right? By the way, it's not me. I'm just the mayor here. Like I'll go to jail if I don't fix it, which is true, right? So that's a beautiful thing. That's how regulation is supposed to work. Give the politicians some breathing room. DC Water and Sewer Authority gets to work to figure out what's the solution. They had two solutions. One was to build a massive gray infrastructure tunnel underneath the city. And by the way, they would have had to do 3 of those. And they did one. And by the way, they did the first $1 billion per tunnel. $3 billion project. $1 billion, they did one on time and on budget. That is worth a moment of silence, Jamie. Big government, public works project on time and on government, on time and on budget by the DC government. All to say they're good at it. They're good at building these tunnels, right? But while they were building that tunnel, they got enamored with a possible alternative solution to maybe that third tunnel, which was green infrastructure. Green infrastructure is just nature. Fancy word, nature. If we put a bunch of nature around the city to the tune of about 350 acres, it could maybe serve as a sponge so that when we have the big rain, sponge, hold, slowly trickle it into the sewer over a few day period of time so the sewer doesn't hit that peak volume and then send the poop to the Potomac River. Like an interesting idea. Let's call that innovation. Let's call tunnel business as usual. Nobody needs another tunnel. But the risk of the green infrastructure was beyond the reach of what the government thought it should do. They wanted to do it. And this is the classic quandary that we look for. Mm-hmm. If you're a government person and you're like, I should probably just do the tunnel. Meanwhile, all the citizens are like, I'll bring on the green infrastructure. But that's risky. This is safe. Given have to pay for things. And we went in and said, listen, why don't we do this weird outcomes-based financing thing? And said, what if we brought in investors, impact investors, which are a source of capital that's growing exponentially every year. Let's get them to somehow pay for this green infrastructure to the point where they're taking the performance risk of the green infrastructure off of your shoulders, you being the government. So let's de-risk it a little bit to the point where it's a rational choice for you to choose the thing that you want to choose. And that's what we did. And so that was the first environmental impact bond. That's what we call them, which is a nerdy title. An environmental impact bond to bring in that capital to pay for the green infrastructure. For those of your listeners who are in DC, you're seeing it all over.
And now let's bring in back to the pay for performance piece of this, right? So the idea being now that a lot of money's been spent on this, you've given the politicians cover and sort of the energy to go in a unusual, sort of more risky direction, but a direction that everyone agrees is probably a better idea. Assuming it, like, what's the last step in the sort of the financial doohickey that makes it go, yeah, that worked?
So at the end of that 5 years, when we open up the magic box, and it will either land in, it will either have performed as predicted, higher than predicted, or lower than predicted. And each one of these buckets has an interest rate associated with it. And so the investors are very much looking forward to finding out whether they got a 6% return, a 3% return, or a 0% return. And the city wants it to land up here. The investors want it to land up here. The citizens want it to land up here, because if it lands up here, everybody wins. Investors make more money. The city saves $175 million if it lands up here. Does that make sense? So we design these things so everybody wins or everybody loses. Unlike how municipal bonds are structured. Municipal bonds, let's do 1 minute on municipal bonds. Hang in there with me, Jamie. I know you can. Okay, here goes the municipal bond. Here's how cities have to pay for things. So I'm the BWI airport. I got to build a tarmac. I float a municipal bond. I do whatever that. Now it's a thing. And Jamie, you go on to Schwab.whatever and you buy my bond, right? So now I have your money to build the thing. By the way, I don't have to build the thing. I could change my mind, right? Matter of fact, I can burn your cash in the dumpster out back. You might even be interested in that. And my point of saying that is, you wouldn't be angry at me.
Because I still get
paid. Exactly. I pay you back at a regular interval, and then I pay your principal back, regardless of whether I burned it in the cash or I built the tarmac. That is what, and we're trying to build on that tool to kind of flip that dynamic, Jamie, so that when you buy my bond, you're actually bought into the project, right? And you're taking a bet that this thing is actually going to work. And we're seeing in the marketplace a growing appetite for that from investors, which is good news for municipalities.
And on the city side, in your example, not only can I not just burn the cash, I actually have to build the tarmac. It's not, and the better I build the tarmac, the better I'm going to be, the more I'm going to save, and the happier my investors are going to be.
Correct.
Where else are the environmental impact bond? Where else is this happening?
So for that particular green infrastructure to address stormwater and flooding issues in urban centers, that is, remember I was saying there's 455 communities around the United States with combined sewer systems. Yep. So we are replicating that transaction in Buffalo, New York, and Memphis, Tennessee, and New Orleans, and Baltimore, and pick a city with a combined sewer system, and pretty good chance that we are working there.
Can you talk us through the process, seeing the need, creating the project, and then finding the capital and investors?
Sure. Well, let me start with the last piece. I got into this business thinking that would be hard. That's the easiest piece. The hardest piece is, and I would say that your first part of your question about how to see the need, we have really, really, really blindingly smart people working at Quantified Ventures. and they're like Freakonomics brains, right? They see things weird. And so they're good at finding what we call stuck puzzles. Very big, highly replicable, massive potential for impact, like the combined sewer system that has been stuck for 150 years. So we look for those kinds of things. Now that I'm not saying that's easy, but that's in our office and fairly heady, nerdy work. And parading that model out and finding brave public sector leaders willing to raise their hand and say, sure, I'll be the first one to ever do that weird thing. That's hard to find. So we have to kiss a lot of frogs. And the more we produce in terms of the number of these transactions where more government leaders can say, hey, I like your thing. But now that I've noticed that others have done it and they didn't lose an eye, now I'm interested. We're seeing a lot more of that. So the adoption of this new innovative model is picking up. We're still at smash mouth football, gaining every yard way. So I don't want to paint the picture that we found the easy button to achieve the 3 steps that your caller is asking about, but it's getting easier every day.
Thank you.
So in a different side of our company, one of our largest clients, the U.S. Forest Service, who, because they're put more and more of their operating budgets going to putting out wildfires, they have less and less of their capital in their budget to deploy on infrastructure in their existing national forests. And so for those forests that find themselves a little bit in that death spiral where less investment is happening, visitorship goes down, you've got a lot of cities and villages around the perimeter of those unloved forests that really suffer from would benefit from great visitorship and suffer when they find themselves in that death spiral. So the U.S. Forest Service tends to bring some of those national forests to Quantified Ventures to see what we can do from an outcomes-based transaction standpoint. Here's an interesting one. So in southeastern Ohio, this is coal mining abandonment towns. This is rough economic times in southeastern Appalachian, Ohio. Mm-hmm. Here's what we did. So we built a world-class or financing a world-class set of mountain biking trails as a destination site, given where it is in the United States, given its proximity and drivability, as a destination site. And then we worked with all the 6 towns that are around the perimeter of that. Think of the national forest, just circle, right? And you got the 6 towns around it. And what we did is we thought, let's see here, Appalachian Trail in a circle. Appalachian Trail, I don't do this, but other humans do. They hike for a day. They get off, they stay at the diner, or they stay at the motel, they eat at the diner, and then they get back on, they do it another day. We just kind of built that around in a circle, 6-day ride, big destination, and the payback mechanism to the investors is out of the bed tax, meaning those motels are empty now, but what if humans were in there? They would be paying, right? Goodness would happen for those towns, right? And so the tax on each one of those beds, given that the humans are coming from the trail and the diner thing with the motel thing, that was that. What's the outcome we wanted? This was an economic development driver with an outcomes-based financing mechanism because there wasn't regional capital to invest in what needed to be invested in. So we just flipped the model so the government can pay on the back end when success is validated, meaning there's a human sleeping in the bed, as opposed to paying for everything on the front end and kind of hoping it works out.
Yeah. And you've got, I am a mountain biker. I'm one of the humans who does that and is actually in not too far from that neck of the woods. Every mountain biker coming into every one of those towns is also buying meals. Someone's going to set up mountain bike shops to sell tires and grease and chains and do repairs. I've seen this. There's actually an example of this in Vermont that I won't get into that's done this exact same thing for a small town in northeastern Vermont. And it's really, really cool. The other piece of this, Eric, it seems to me, is if there's sort of the environmental aspect, you got this national forest. And I don't know if this is on the radar for you all or not, but it sort of, and maybe you hinted at it already. I might have been distracted, but that you've got people coming in and using that forest and appreciating that forest. That's going to have an impact too, I think, on the natural beauty of this area of southeastern Ohio too, right? I mean, in terms of where we as taxpayers decide to take. Am I wrong? Am I right?
Well, I would even just start with wildfires, right? Like, so if you leave the forest to be unloved, instead of actually managing it, right? You're susceptible to things that are going to bring it to the ground, right? And so just by bringing resources and humans and to enjoy and to love and to take advantage of what forests are great at, you've moved from a defensive posture and helpless to actively managing a forest.
Yeah. Wonderful. What, just so folks can get a sense, I know this is like sort of northwest of Pittsburgh, and I apologize, I should have had a map ready to go. I don't. What are the towns? You said there's 4 towns that are sort of in this ring.
Yeah, it's in Athens County, and it's worth Googling, and it's worth looking at. It's an amazingly gorgeous area of the planet. People are just mighty fine and welcoming. The Bailey's Trail system is for you, and you should go there. Jamie, you should just pack your car right now. Sure. Hey, can I talk about the farmer one? The farmer one's great.
Yeah, of course.
And so we set out to see if we could use this kind of model, a way of paying for things, to address a serious environmental issue that surrounds the agricultural field, which is around water quality. Meaning, when fertilizer, which has phosphorus and nitrate in it, when it rains on the farm and that fertilizer gets into the waterways and then goes 300 miles downstream to Des Moines Water Authority has to process that phosphorus and nitrate and clean it up, treat that water.
Yeah,
it's expensive. And they would rather the farmers just do what's called the agricultural best management practices or the conservation practices that would reduce that.
Yeah.
The problem is it costs money to do that on farms, and a lot of farmers, my family are all farmers in Iowa. They're operating razor thin margin businesses, and so making choices about capital expenditures on your farm for things that don't directly impact harvest yield, not going to happen. So it's a stuck problem, but it's massive. The hypoxia in the Gulf of Mexico, trace it right back up Mississippi River to this challenge. So we got to work to try.
I'll just say there's. I mean, I'm actually in another part of my life working on a project here up in Vermont. An entire core of researchers at University of Vermont is trying to tackle this exact same problem for Lake Champlain, because Vermont lives and dies by its agriculture. I mean, the heart of the state is its agriculture in many ways, but they're stuck with this problem where the agriculture and other things, city runoff and stuff, are nailing the Lake Champlain for this exact same reason. So Chesapeake Bay, the Great Lakes, I'm sure, you name it. You mentioned the Gulf; it's happening everywhere. So what are you guys able to bring to the table? What's the machinery that you're making happen to fix this?
So the obvious choice for a Cedar Rapids, Iowa, would be to buy the $1 billion machine and put it on your treatment facility to better process that, right? And so we look for upstream nature-based solutions that would be cheaper than doing that, right? Just like back to the DC water example. And it turns out there are evidence-based practices, which basically means they're investable. There are some farmers who do these things, and they usually do them by getting government grants to do them or philanthropic grants to do that. Neither one of those two things scale. We're all about bringing market forces to see if we can bring some of these to scale. So here's what we do, or here's what we tried to do. We tried to make it pencil, meaning the math to work out, that we could pay farmers to implement these conservation practices on their farm, pay them profitably, so they make money, not just a grant, cover a little bit of their costs, not all of them. That's torture. Let's have them make money by doing the things on their farms that reduce the phosphorus and nitrate runoff that's getting into the waterways and going down to Cedar Rapids. Didn't work, didn't pencil. And that was a bad day. Until we realized that 5 of the 6 conservation practices that we were asking farmers to contemplate building, they also sequestered carbon. So we priced that outcome. And when we priced the outcome for phosphorus and nitrate and sold it to municipalities, it didn't work. So we didn't sell it. Does that make sense? But when we took the second benefit, the second outcome, carbon, and began to work with the Cargills of the world, massive companies, that's the largest private sector company in North America, by the way, they've made significant sustainability promises to their shareholders, including how much carbon reduction they were going to, and that's challenging work to reduce that. So when we walked in with pricing that was attractive to a Cargill to say, would you buy this carbon at this price? They were intrigued because buying carbon from some other offset randomly, not in their supply chain, interesting, but they'll do it to make their objectives. But these were carbon being sequestered in their supply chain, which basically means we're making their supply chain more resilient, which is attractive to them. So the Cargills, Danones, the PepsiCos of the world who have made these big carbon sustainability goals, we sell carbon to them, and now we sell the water quality benefits to municipalities and states. Around 7 states, we're on pace to be flowing about $800 million to farmers in those 7 states around the Midwest over the next 10 years, and we're really excited about that one.
That's fantastic. And does it change from the farmer's perspective? Is it affecting sort of the price for the crops they're getting, or are they getting extra money to do sort of like buffers near waterway? Like what's it look like on the ground for the farmer, I guess is my question.
I'll just keep it simple. And for the non-farmers, the example that feels intuitive is cover crops. So cover crops are planting something on your field. You're not going to sell that plant, but by having it take root, it's going to hold the soil in the non-growing season.
Right.
Only 6% of those 7 states currently uses cover crops. We're paying farmers to implement cover crops so it's now at a profitable function for them because we figured out how to sell the outcomes profitably. And when we start to bring that to scale, you'll start to see some impact on the downstream hypoxia challenges that we were talking about, Jamie.
Which is, so folks, we've had environmental impact bonds, we've had some of the recreation and sort of economic health of a region through the mountain biking example. We've taken this, Eric's taken us out to the Midwest and Iowa and sustainable farming and ranching. So I would encourage you to visit their website, quantifiedventures.com. And on the whole website is actually rather informative and helpful. And you can go to find their case studies and click through some of the ones we've talked to and read about all the other examples. It's really, really, really interesting stuff. And for some of you, it may apply to your world, and I'd encourage you to reach out to them and ask some questions. And to me, I think there's incredible hope in you guys bringing this sort of analytic, I'm trying to think how to say this, both tremendous heart and intention, and as I lovingly said in my description about this show, like an intense amount of geekery around policy and finance, to make the machinery happen around all the fine point machinery that's going to make the big things that everyone's hoping for affect real change, I guess is clumsily said.
Yeah, I think you said it very well, Jamie. I mean, I think that's what's at the heart of what we try to do. The work that we do is like nerd heaven. I'm a nerd. And it's also a way to kind of align the complexity of a weird person like an Eric Letsinger. And I think there's a lot of Eric Letzingers out there who want that alignment. And we're fine. And there's a lot of investors who want that alignment. There's more investors who want that alignment now than there's ever been. So if money is moving in that direction, let's go. Let's satisfy that demand for capital to be aligned with the environmental and social and health outcomes that we all want. These are not. It's not a complicated. There's not a lot of people who don't want those 3 things. We want great environmental outcomes, we want great health outcomes, and we want great social outcomes, and we want great economic outcomes. Let's do that.